You ever get that feeling you're playing a game but someone changed all the rules right before your turn? Yeah, for a lot of millennials and Gen Z, that's exactly what the path to a stable middle-class life feels like. So today, we're going to dig in and investigate why that traditional dream feels so out of reach.
I mean, this question from a Reddit user just hits you, right? Did we prepare for a life that no longer exists? It perfectly captures this feeling that the future everyone told you to work for, the one you were promised, well, it just kind of vanished. It's a really powerful thought.
So what did happen to that promise? To really get why there's this huge disconnect, we've got to look at how the whole economic game has changed over the last few decades. So let's break it all down.
Right. The old playbook, it seems so simple, didn't it? Study hard, get into a good college, land a good job, buy a house, and boom, you're set. But as one person on Reddit put it, that advice belongs to a bygone era. Today, that path just isn't the guaranteed recipe for success it used to be.
Okay, this chart right here gets to the absolute heart of the problem. Since 1979, worker productivity has just skyrocketed. I mean, thanks to technology and just being more efficient. But then you look at median wages. They've barely moved. So what does that mean? It means people are working harder, creating more value than ever before, but their paychecks just don't reflect that at all.
And you know, there's actually a name for this feeling. It's called a vibecession. You see all the headlines about low unemployment or the stock market booming, but for most people, that's not their reality. Think about it. When the stock market hits a new high, but your grocery bill is up 20%, that official data feels, well, it feels pretty meaningless. It shows how those big picture numbers just don't tell the whole story anymore.
Now let's dive into the first big piece of this puzzle, the world of work. Honestly, the whole idea of climbing a corporate ladder at one single company for 40 years, it feels like something out of a history book. The career path for people today is a whole different ballgame.
For so many millennials, their careers kicked off right in the middle of the 2008 Great Recession. And as this user shares, that experience left a scar. It created this deep-seated economic anxiety. It wasn't just a bad job market, it was a defining moment that basically taught an entire generation to prioritize just surviving over actually thriving.
So you fast forward to the pandemic, and suddenly we saw this massive reaction to years and years of feeling overworked and undervalued. They called it the Great Resignation, but it was so much more than just quitting. It was a huge collective pushback against bad working conditions and stagnant pay. People started to realize their own value and began demanding more.
And that really shows the bigger shift away from that old hustle culture mindset. We're seeing all these new approaches to work pop up, things like quiet quitting or job reshuffling. They're not about being lazy. They're about people trying to redefine success to include things like, mental health and actually having a life outside of the office.
But all this pressure, the constant need to succeed in a shaky economy, to pay off insane student debt, to just keep up, it all comes at a cost. And that cost is burnout. It's led to this widespread feeling of just being completely exhausted from the never-ending struggle to get ahead. All right, so let's move on to the second major pillar of that broken dream, owning a home. For generations before, this was the cornerstone of building wealth. For so many people today, it just feels like a locked door they don't have the key to.
3.8 million. As of 2020, that was the housing supply deficit in the U.S. That number is just staggering. It points to a really simple but massive problem. We just haven't built enough homes for the number of people who need them. And the problem's even more specific than that. The shortage is hitting hardest for the smaller, entry-level starter homes. You see, after the 2008 crash, construction on those kinds of affordable houses just plummeted, and it never really recovered. And you've got other things making it worse, like zoning laws that make it tough to build smaller homes, and big investment firms swooping in and buying up properties, which just squeezes out regular first-time buyers.
This table really tells the whole story. Back in 1991, sure, the older generations owned most of the property, but young boomers, at about the same age as many millennials today, already had a pretty solid footing, owning 34% of the market. Now look at today. Millennials hold a much, much smaller piece of that pie.
And this anecdote someone shared, wow, it just perfectly captures that generational gap. The difference in what people think a house costs versus what it actually costs is enormous. And it's why millennials get so frustrated when they get well-meaning but completely outdated advice.
So this brings us to the real core of it all. a head-to-head comparison of the economic world millennials grew up in versus the one their baby boomer parents had at the same age. And believe me, the differences are stark.
Just let this one sink in for a second. Despite being the most educated generation in history, millennials earn 20% less than their parents did. That one stat alone is just a brutal takedown of the whole idea that every generation automatically does better than the last.
And this chart just lays it all out. Where boomers had access to affordable college and pretty stable careers, millennials are facing record-breaking student debt in this unpredictable gig economy. The very foundations of economic stability that were once just a given have pretty much crumbled.
Now, you might have heard about this thing called the Great Wealth Transfer. Sounds pretty good, right? A huge $84 trillion transfer of assets from boomers to their kids is supposed to be happening. But it's not quite that simple. Take a look at the wealth distribution right now. Boomers hold over half of all the wealth in the US. But here's the catch. Experts are really skeptical that this transfer is going to solve the problem for the average millennial. And why is that? Well, because over half of that wealth is concentrated in the top 2% of households. So it's not going to be some even trickle-down effect. That inheritance is mostly going to kids who are already well off, which will probably just make the wealth gap even wider.
So if the old playbook is totally obsolete, what's next? Well, this new economic reality is basically forcing younger generations to write their own playbook, to completely redefine what a good, successful, and fulfilling life even looks like.
This question from another online discussion really gets to the psychological shift that's happened. The goalposts have completely moved. For so many people, the big aspiration has gone from chasing your dreams to just trying to stay afloat. And this response just drives that point home. Even being functional is a struggle. Fulfillment is a dream that many just can't afford to chase. The daily grind is just so demanding that the idea of fulfillment has become a luxury. The main focus is just on being functional, paying bills, getting by, because there's no energy or money left for anything more.
So, we're left with this question. The traditional map to success that our parents and their parents used, it's gone. And in its place, people are being forced to draw their own maps, based on totally new values and new realities. The question for all of us is, what does that new map look like?